Beneath the glittering lights of Dallas high society, a single sentence shattered a love that once seemed unbreakable. On the night of a grand gala, while cameras flashed and music soared, Owen Waverley, the man the world adored, pushed away the only woman who saw the truth behind his perfect facade. Zoe Bennet walked into the darkness with her heart in pieces, unaware that her departure would ignite a battle of power, betrayal, and redemption that would change both their lives forever. Tonight, a secret will rise. A past mistake will demand its price, and love will face its greatest test. If you love emotional, dramatic romances, subscribe to our channel. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers so we can continue growing together. The Waverley estate shimmered beneath 1,000 golden lights, rising over Dallas like a palace, carved from luxury and old Texan pride. The drive was lined with manicured hedges, white roses, and lanterns that glowed softly as if welcoming royalty. Inside, the annual charity weekend had transformed the mansion into a world of polished marble, champagne towers, and carefully staged perfection. Photographers glided through the crowds, murmuring admiration for the man at the center of every headline. Owen Waverley, the Dubai Maharaja, the billionaire with an untouchable image and a smile that could melt through the coldest investor's guard. But tonight, his smile softened for only one person, Zoe Bennet. She moved through the ballroom with an elegance that outshone the gowns glittering around her. Her dress, a deep emerald silk, flowed like liquid shadow with each step. Her hair was swept into a low twist, exposing the graceful line of her neck. She carried herself with the calm confidence of a woman who did not need to fight for attention. Her quiet beauty attracted it naturally. Owen watched her with the gaze of a man who had once been lost and found a lighthouse. His expression was subtle enough for the cameras to miss, but not subtle enough to hide from her. She felt his eyes before she turned. When their gazes met, the noise of the ballroom faded. He crossed to her slowly, measured steps that looked regal without trying. "You look breathtaking tonight," Owen murmured, his voice low enough to be heard only by her. Zoe allowed a small smile to lift her lips. "You say that every year." "That is because it is true every year." Their hands brushed, a fleeting touch, warm and electric. Zoe felt the familiar pull in her chest, the one that reminded her why she had fallen in love with a man whose world rarely allowed softness. "Come with me," Owen whispered, "just for a moment." They slipped away from the ballroom and stepped onto the terrace overlooking the estate grounds. The night was warm, the air scented with roses, and the city lights in the distance shimmered like scattered diamonds. Owen removed his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders in a tender gesture that made her heart tighten. "You should be inside," Zoe teased gently. "Your admirers are probably wondering where their star vanished." "I do not care," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "I would rather be here." She leaned into his touch, feeling that bittersweet mix of love and longing. For a moment, the world felt simple, just the two of them aligned under the moonlight. But Zoe's mind, sharp and restless, wandered back to what she had discovered earlier that day. A missing signature, a payment routed through a vendor she did not recognize, a pattern she could not quite explain. She cleared her throat softly. "Owen, there is something we should talk about." His thumb stopped its gentle motion. His eyes narrowed, still tender but now alert. "What is wrong?" She hesitated, unwilling to shatter the moment. Yet honesty had always been the quiet promise between them. "I saw something in the foundation reports, a few inconsistencies that concern me." Owen exhaled slowly, the kind of exhale that carried the weight of expectations and responsibilities. "Zoe," he said gently, "tonight is important. Let us not complicate it." "I am not trying to complicate anything," she replied, her voice soft but steady. "I just want to make sure everything is handled correctly." He cupped her face with both hands, searching her expression. "Trust me," he said, "I will look into it. Just give me time." Zoe nodded, though the answer carried that familiar ache. She had given him time before. Still, she chose to believe him again, for tonight at least. When they returned to the ballroom, a slow love song drifted through the air. Owen extended his hand. "Dance with me." Zoe's heart warmed. Always. He pulled her close, one arm around her waist, the other holding her hand with a tenderness that felt like a promise. Their bodies swayed, fitting together naturally, as if every breath had been choreographed long before they met. Her head rested near his shoulder, and she felt the steady rhythm of his heart. "You know," Owen murmured, "I remember the first time I saw you at that investigative conference. You were the only woman in the room who looked like she already knew the truth about everyone there." Zoe laughed softly. "I probably did." "Yes," he said, brushing his lips lightly across her temple. "And you still do. That is why I need you beside me." His words wrapped around her like silk, but beneath that sweetness, Zoe sensed a shadow she could not name. Something Owen was not saying, something deeper than foundation reports and gala politics. Still, she lifted her head and met his gaze. "I'm beside you," she whispered, "as long as you let me be." Emotion flickered in his eyes. Vulnerability, fear, love. He pulled her closer, as if he knew how fragile the moment was. As the music faded and applause echoed across the ballroom, Zoe felt both adored and unsettled. She was wrapped in Owen's warmth, yet something in her chest remained restless. Tonight, the world saw perfection, but perfection always had cracks. And love, even the strongest kind, needed truth to survive. For now, Zoe held onto the way Owen's hand tightened gently at her waist, the way his eyes softened for her alone, the way he kissed her forehead in a gesture that felt like a vow. For now, that was enough. Tomorrow would bring questions, but tonight they danced beneath golden lights as if nothing could break them. Monday morning arrived wrapped in the quiet glow of early sunlight, pouring through the tall windows of the Waverley estate. The house was still, the staff moving discreetly in the background, and the aroma of fresh coffee lingered in the air like a gentle invitation. Zoe Bennett sat at the long marble kitchen island, her laptop open, the foundation's financial reports displayed in neat columns that felt anything but harmless. She traced a fingertip along a line item she had already read 3 times. A consulting fee approved unusually quickly, a vendor name she had never seen, a digital signature that seemed to belong to Owen, though she knew him well enough to recognize the subtle difference in tone when he authorized something personally. Her chest tightened, not with suspicion, but with the uneasiness of someone discovering threads that did not quite weave into the fabric she expected. The moment she heard footsteps, she closed the laptop gently, as if the act alone could soften the weight pressing against her heart. Owen Waverley entered the kitchen still in his gym clothes, his dark hair slightly damp from an early workout. He carried himself with that effortless elegance that made even his most casual movements look deliberate. When he saw Zoe, his expression brightened, his body relaxing as if her presence brought him peace. "You are awake early," he said, leaning down to kiss her cheek. His lips lingered for a heartbeat longer than necessary, warm and affectionate. "Did you sleep well?" Zoe smiled softly, though something inside her remained unsettled. "Well enough. You were up before dawn." "I could not sleep," he admitted, reaching for the coffee pot. "The gala's aftermath kept my mind running." He poured a cup for himself, then instinctively prepared hers exactly the way she liked it. When he slid the mug toward her, the simple gesture warmed her chest. She watched him for a moment, admiring the outline of his shoulders beneath his fitted shirt, the strength in his hands, the tenderness in the small things he never realized revealed his heart. It would be so easy to forget her worries in the comfort of this routine, in the familiarity of their mornings together. But silence was not honesty. "There is something I want to talk to you about," she said quietly. Owen paused with the mug halfway to his lips. His gaze found hers, soft yet weary, as if he had expected this moment but hoped it would not come so soon. "Is it about the foundation?" Zoe nodded. I found a few irregularities. Nothing dramatic, at least not yet, but they concern me. Owen set his mug down, the soft click sounding louder than it should have. Zoe, we talked about this last night. You should not worry. I will handle it. I am not worried, she replied gently. I just want clarity. I want to understand what those payments mean. He approached her slowly, his fingers brushing the side of her arm in a touch meant to soothe, though she sensed it was also meant to redirect. Everything is under control, he murmured. You do not need to carry this. Her eyes softened with affection, but her voice remained steady. I am not carrying it. I am sharing it. That is what partners do. He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in his expression, before he leaned down to kiss her forehead. Later, he whispered. We can talk later. I promise. Zoe wanted to accept that promise, to allow the warmth of his lips against her skin to dissolve the tension inside her. But she also knew that promises without action were fragile things. Still, she nodded, for now. Owen left for a meeting shortly after, and Zoe waited until she heard the sound of the car pulling away before opening her laptop again. The estate felt too large, too quiet without him. She missed him, even when he was only gone for a short time, a truth she rarely admitted even to herself. She began cross-referencing vendor names, matching accounts, building notes the way she once did in her investigative journalism days. Her fingers moved with practiced confidence, and the familiar rhythm of analysis brought her unexpected comfort. She worked like this for nearly an hour before a soft knock sounded at the open kitchen door. Caleb Waverley stepped inside, polished as always in a tailored suit that managed to look effortless despite its obvious cost. His smile was warm, but carried an edge Zoe had never fully trusted. Good morning, Zoe, he said, his tone smooth and cheerful. Owen mentioned you might be reviewing some documents today. Zoe closed her laptop calmly. Just a few things I wanted to revisit. Caleb approached with a soft chuckle. You always were thorough, even when you do not need to be. Her posture remained relaxed, though her intuition sharpened. I believe understanding the details is important. Yes, of course. He placed his hands in his pockets, adopting an air of friendly concern. But you know how these things go. Too much digging can create unnecessary stress. These are delicate matters. Zoe met his gaze, unflinching. Delicacy is not an excuse for ignoring facts. Caleb's smile tightened, just barely. Of course. But if you need clarification, I would be more than happy to help. I will let you know if I do, she said, her tone polite but firm. He gave a small nod, his expression unreadable, then left as smoothly as he arrived. The moment he disappeared, Zoe felt again that faint but unmistakable warning in her chest. Still, she believed in transparency. She believed in Owen, and she believed that love built on truth could withstand any storm. By early afternoon, she decided she needed air. The sun was bright, the sky impossibly clear, and the cityscape shimmered like a painting. She drove to her favorite cafe in Highland Park, a quiet place with warm lighting and soft music. As she sat by the window, reviewing her notes once more, she reminded herself not to spiral into assumptions. She simply needed answers. Her phone vibrated, a message from Owen. Dinner tonight, just us. Her heart softened instantly. She typed back quickly. Of course, I would love that. When they met that evening at a rooftop bar overlooking the Dallas skyline, the air was warm and carried the faint scent of citrus from the cocktails served at nearby tables. Owen was already waiting at a corner table, the golden hour light casting a soft glow across his face. He looked tired, his shoulders heavy from a day of endless obligations, but when he saw Zoe, his expression brightened. You look beautiful, he said, standing to pull out her chair. His voice was filled with the same tenderness she had always treasured. And you look like you need this night, she replied softly. They ordered dinner, though neither seemed very interested in the food. The focus was on each other. Owen took her hands across the table, his thumbs brushing gentle circles on her skin. The simple touch brought warmth rushing through her chest. "I missed you today," he murmured. Zoe felt her breath catch. "Did you?" "Yes. I always miss you when we are apart." His voice deepened, growing softer, more intimate. "Zoe, when I am with you, everything feels clearer, calmer." She held his gaze, feeling the unspoken weight behind his words. He rarely showed vulnerability, even to her. His openness tonight felt like a precious gift. "Owen," she began gently, "about the Foundation reports. I am not trying to create tension. I'm just trying to understand the discrepancies." His hands tightened around hers. "Zoe, I need you to trust me." She inhaled slowly. "I do trust you, but trust grows stronger with transparency." Owen looked away for a moment, his eyes drifting toward the shimmering skyline. When he looked back, his expression was tender but conflicted. "I will explain everything," he said softly. "Just not tonight. Tonight I want to be here with you. Only you." Her heart ached with affection. She reached up and touched his cheek, her fingertips brushing the faint stubble along his jaw. "Owen," she whispered, "I love being with you. I always do." He leaned into her touch, his eyes half closing as if savoring the moment. "Zoe, you are the only part of my life that feels real," he confessed. Her breath trembled. "Then let me be part of everything, not just the beautiful parts." He took her hand again and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. That soft contact carried more emotion than any extravagant display. "I will try," he whispered. "For you, I will try." They finished dinner slowly, speaking in low voices, sharing moments of laughter, and enjoying the quiet harmony that had always drawn them together. Afterward, they walked to the edge of the rooftop, where the wind played with Zoe's hair and the city lights sparkled beneath them like countless tiny stars. Owen wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Zoe," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear, "you make everything brighter." She rested her head against his shoulder. "And you make everything worth fighting for." He turned her gently to face him, his hands framing her waist. The tension in the air thickened, charged with a quiet magnetic longing that neither rushed. Their eyes held, speaking truths they were not yet brave enough to voice. "Owen," she whispered, "we are going to be all right, aren't we?" His fingers brushed her cheek, trailing down to her jaw with a tenderness that made her chest ache. "Yes," he said softly, "we will be more than all right." He kissed her then, slow, warm, full of emotion. A kiss that carried love, apology, and devotion all at once. Zoe melted into him, her hands sliding up to rest on his chest, feeling the strong beat of his heart. The world around them faded until there was nothing but the two of them wrapped in the golden twilight. When they finally separated, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "Zoe," he whispered, "there is nothing I would not face for you." She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of his words settle deep inside her. "And there is nothing I would not understand," she replied softly. They held each other as the night breeze wrapped around them, and for that moment neither the Foundation, nor the doubts, nor the world beyond the rooftop existed. There was only love, fragile and strong, quiet and consuming, a love they both believed would always find a way. The night of the museum gala arrived with the kind of grandeur that only Dallas society could produce. Stretched limousines glittered beneath the street lamps, women in gowns stepped out like living jewels, and men in impeccable suits escorted them with polished smiles. The city hummed with anticipation, every detail perfected for an evening that celebrated philanthropy, elegance, and influence. It was an event designed to be unforgettable, the kind of night that would be photographed, whispered about, and replayed across every social media feed by dawn. Inside the museum's glass atrium, the atmosphere shimmered with sophistication. Golden chandeliers cast warm light across marble floors, and violins sang softly through the air. Sculptures stood like silent witnesses as guests drifted between the exhibits, glasses of champagne catching the glow with each movement. At the center of it all, Owen Waverley stood with the quiet authority of a man who belonged in every room he entered. His charcoal suit was tailored to perfection, his posture confident, his expression composed. But the moment Zoe arrived, the world around him softened. She stepped through the main entrance in a gown the color of midnight, the fabric flowing around her like smoke. A delicate shimmer traced the edges of the dress, making her appear luminous under the chandelier light. Her hair fell in soft waves over one shoulder, and her eyes carried a depth that drew more attention than any diamond in the room. Conversation slowed as many turned to admire her, though she seemed unaware of the effect she had. Owen's breath caught the instant he saw her. He moved toward her with a steadiness that contrasted with the sudden acceleration of his heart. When he reached her, he extended his hand, his voice low and warm. "You are impossibly beautiful tonight." Zoe's lips curved into a faint, appreciative smile. "And you," she replied softly, "look like the man every headline tries to describe but never fully captures." He lifted her hand and brushed a kiss across her knuckles, letting his lips linger longer than courtesy required. Zoe felt the touch all the way to her heart, the warmth spreading through her in a slow, intoxicating bloom. "Stay close to me," he murmured, his thumb stroking her hand gently. "The night would feel empty without you." "I intend to," she whispered, her gaze tender. "But we will have to greet a few people first." Owen offered his arm, and Zoe slipped her hand into the crook of it with an intimacy that felt natural, even serene. They moved through the gallery together, the perfect image of unity. Guests greeted them with admiration, some with envy, but always with respect. They were the couple others watched, the pair people whispered about, predicting a future filled with influence and legacy. For a moment, Zoe allowed herself to enjoy the dreamlike elegance of the evening. Owen leaned close whenever he introduced her, his voice filled with quiet pride. His hand rested lightly at her waist, guiding her with care. Their glances carried soft electricity, a private conversation unfolding silently between them. It was during one of those tender glances that Zoe felt her resolve strengthen. She needed to speak with him. She needed clarity, not avoidance. And she wanted those answers tonight, not to create conflict, but to preserve the trust that shaped their love. When the orchestra shifted into a new melody, Owen turned to her with a smile that warmed her entire being. "Dance with me," he said gently. Zoe nodded, and he led her to the center of the floor, where couples moved in graceful arcs beneath the golden lights. Owen's hand settled at her waist, his touch firm yet full of unspoken affection. She placed her other hand against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart beneath her palm. They swayed together in slow, fluid motion, eyes locked, breaths mingling. "You feel distant tonight," she murmured softly. "Not cold, just guarded." He dipped his head slightly, brushing his lips near her temple. "Only because the night requires too much from me. But my heart is where it always is, with you." Zoe's voice softened even more. "Then let your heart speak to me. I found something in the foundation reports that worries me. I need to talk about it." Owen inhaled sharply, the movement small but noticeable beneath her hand. He drew her closer, as if the dance could shield them from the seriousness of her words. "Zoe," he whispered, "tonight is not the right moment." Her brows knitted gently. "If not tonight, then when? This matters to me." He lifted his head, meeting her gaze with an intensity she could not easily decipher. "Trust me," he said again, the same words he had spoken before. "Please." "I always trust you," she replied, her voice trembling with honesty. "But trust does not mean silence." The song ended, and applause filled the room. Owen stepped back slightly, but he kept hold of her hand. The warmth between them remained, but something in the air shifted, subtle, yet unmistakable. A board member approached, congratulating Owen on the foundation's work. Others followed, and soon a small crowd formed around them. Amid the greetings and polite conversation, Zoe stood by his side, smiling graciously, though her heart grew heavier with each unanswered question. When the crowd finally dispersed, Zoe tugged gently on Owen's sleeve. "We need a moment alone," she said. He glanced toward the far corridor, where the lighting was dimmer and conversations quieter. "All right," he agreed, though tension rippled through his jaw. They walked together, their steps soft against the polished floor. Zoe felt her pulse quicken, not from fear, but from the importance of the moment. She did not want a fight. She wanted truth. She wanted to protect the love they had built. They reached an empty hallway bathed in the warm glow of wall sconces. Zoe turned to face him fully, her hands resting lightly against his chest. "Owen," she began, her voice gentle but resolute, "I need you to tell me what is going on. I'm seeing things that do not add up. I cannot pretend I do not notice." He closed his eyes for a second as if gathering strength. When he opened them again, the tenderness remained, but so did something unsettled. "Zoe," he said quietly, "you are complicating something that does not need to be complicated." She flinched at the words, though she tried not to show it. "I am not complicating anything. I am asking for clarity. That is all." His breath tightened. "I have so much to manage tonight. Investors, donors, the board. I cannot add this to the list right now." Zoe stepped closer, her hand rising to cup his cheek. "I am not another task, Owen. I am your partner. Talk to me." Her voice trembled with love, not accusation. Her touch was warm, seeking reassurance, but the pressure swirling around Owen was overwhelming, and instead of drawing strength from her, he recoiled into defensiveness. "Zoe, stop," he said sharply. The word struck her harder than he intended. She lowered her hands slowly. "I'm just trying to understand. And I am telling you that I cannot deal with this tonight." His voice rose, edged with frustration he could not contain. "You need to stop digging into things you do not fully understand." She blinked. The air grew colder. "I understand enough to know something is wrong," she replied softly. "Is it so terrible for me to ask?" Owen took a step back, his expression storming with fear, pride, and exhaustion. "You are not helping," he snapped. "You are making everything worse." Zoe's breath trembled. "I am making it worse by caring." He ran a hand through his hair, looking everywhere except into her eyes. Then, with a voice strained by pressure and panic, he said the words that would slice through her heart with devastating precision. "I do not want you near me." For a moment, Zoe could not breathe. Time froze. The hallway fell silent, the golden lights flickering softly, as if dimming in sympathy. She stared at him, her lips parting, her eyes filling with disbelief and hurt. "Owen," she whispered, "you do not mean that." But he said nothing, and silence, in that instant, felt like the cruelest answer of all. Zoe straightened her spine, gathering the fragments of dignity she could still hold. Tears threatened, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of him. "Very well," she whispered, her voice calm but breaking at the edges. "I understand." She stepped away, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor as she walked back toward the ballroom. Not a single tear escaped her until she reached the far exit, where the cold night air embraced her with a sharpness that mirrored the ache inside her chest. Behind her, Owen remained in the dim hallway, breathing hard, his fists clenched, his heart pounding with something that felt dangerously close to regret. But he did not follow her. He stood frozen as the woman he loved walked away, carrying with her the soft glow of everything warm and true, and the museum's golden lights continued to shine, unaware that a love had been wounded in their glow. Zoe Bennet had always believed silence carried meaning. Sometimes it soothed, sometimes it warned, sometimes it healed, but the silence that filled her small new apartment was an entirely different kind of quiet, one that pressed against her ribs and reminded her of everything she had left behind. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic, the empty walls waiting to be claimed by her presence, all seemed to echo one truth. She was alone now, not abandoned, not defeated. Alone by choice, because dignity mattered, because trust mattered, because love without respect could not survive. Still, even knowing all this, she sat on the edge of her modest bed and pressed a trembling hand to her heart, as if she could calm the lingering ache that refused to fade. The apartment was nowhere near the size of the Waverley estate. The floors were wooden instead of marble. The windows overlooked a quiet street rather than a sprawling garden, and the air smelled faintly of fresh paint and new beginnings. But it was hers, her sanctuary, her breathing space. She closed her eyes for a moment, recalling the way Owen had looked at her in that museum hallway. His voice, strained and sharp, still echoed inside her. "I do not want you near me." The sentence cut through her again, but she inhaled slowly, steadying herself. She had not cried when she walked away. She had not raised her voice or pleaded. She simply left, her heart in tatters, but her spine unbroken. Tonight, though, in the privacy of her own space, she finally allowed a single tear to slide down her cheek. She wiped it away before it had fully fallen, refusing to let pain define her. She would rebuild herself piece by piece, even if the process felt like walking barefoot over broken crystal. A soft knock startled her. Zoe rose quickly, smoothing the front of her blouse. She hesitated before opening the door, unsure of who would seek her out so soon. When she unlocked it, she found her friend Marisol Vega standing on the other side, holding 2 containers of soup and a paper bag filled with fresh bread. Marisol's eyes softened instantly. "Oh, Zoe," she whispered, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation and setting the food on the small counter. "I brought dinner. And before you ask, no, I'm not leaving until you eat." Zoe managed a small smile. "You did not have to come." "Yes, I did," Marisol replied firmly. "You needed someone tonight, and you know I would cross the entire city for you." Zoe felt warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you." Marisol gave her a gentle hug, careful not to push too hard, as though afraid Zoe might shatter. "How are you holding up? And do not say fine, or I will throw the soup out of the window." Zoe let out a quiet laugh, the sound fragile but real. "I am breathing." Marisol stroked her arm affectionately. "Breathing is enough for tonight." They sat together at the small dining table, the warm soup sending soft steam into the air. The conversation was light at first, comforting, grounding, but eventually Marisol's gaze sharpened with concern. "Zoe, what happened at that gala? You left so suddenly." Zoe hesitated. Though she trusted Marisol completely, speaking the words aloud felt like reopening a wound. Still, she deserved honesty. "He told me," Zoe murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, "that he did not want me near him." Marisol inhaled sharply. "He said that? Owen Waverley said that to you?" Zoe nodded once, her eyes glistening. "Yes." Marisol reached across the table and took Zoe's hand. "You did the right thing. You left because you know your worth." Zoe swallowed, trying to steady her voice. "I love him, Marisol. That has not changed. But love cannot excuse everything." "No," Marisol agreed softly. "It cannot." Zoe looked toward the window, watching the streetlights flicker like distant stars. She wondered if Owen also looked out a window somewhere in that vast estate, feeling the absence of her presence in every corner of the house. The thought made her chest tighten. Meanwhile, miles away, Owen stood alone in his home office, the lights dim, his hands pressed against the edge of his desk as if he needed the support. The moment Zoe walked away replayed in his mind with agonizing clarity. He had spoken out of fear and frustration, out of a desperate need to control a world that felt increasingly unstable. But none of that justified the hurt he had inflicted. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. "What have I done?" The sound of the house around him felt different tonight, colder, emptier, like a cathedral after the choir had gone silent. The staff moved quietly, their usual rhythm disrupted by the absence of the woman who softened every room she touched. He closed his eyes, remembering the scent of her perfume, the brightness of her smile, the warmth of her hand in his. He imagined her somewhere alone tonight, and the thought gutted him. He grabbed his car keys. Within minutes, Owen was on the road, driving through the city with a single destination in mind. He knew Zoe would not return to the estate, not after what he said, and he knew the only place she could have gone was wherever she felt safe. He arrived at her apartment building, the modest exterior illuminated by soft streetlights. The contrast to the Waverley estate was stark, but Owen barely noticed. He climbed the stairs quickly, each step echoing with regret. When he reached her door, his hand hovered for a moment. He tried to steady his breath before knocking gently. Inside, Zoe froze when she heard it. Marisol's eyes widened. "Is that him?" Zoe's heart raced, a storm of emotions swirling inside her. Pain, hope, fear, love. I think so." Marisol squeezed her shoulder. "You do not have to open it if you are not ready." Zoe inhaled deeply, gathering her strength. "I have to face him eventually." Marisol nodded and stepped into the kitchen to give her privacy. Zoe approached the door slowly, her fingertips trembling as she reached for the handle. When she opened it, Owen stood there in the dim hallway light, looking devastated. His suit jacket was gone, his tie loosened, his eyes filled with raw emotion. "Zoe," he whispered, stepping closer before stopping himself. "Please, let me talk." Her voice was quiet, but steady. "You can come in for a few minutes." He entered, taking in the small apartment, with a glance that carried no judgment, only sadness. Zoe closed the door gently, then faced him, with her arms crossed lightly, a protective gesture she rarely used with him. Owen swallowed hard. "I am sorry," he said immediately. "I should never have said those words to you. I was overwhelmed, cornered, and I lashed out in the worst way possible. Zoe, I did not mean it." Her eyes glistened. "But you said it." "I know," he replied, his voice breaking, "and it is the biggest mistake I have ever made." Zoe looked down, her breath trembling. "Why did you say it, Owen? What made you speak to me like that?" He stepped closer, slowly, as if approaching something fragile. "Fear," he whispered. "Pressure, confusion, none of which excuse it. But I swear to you, I never wanted you gone." Zoe shook her head softly. "Wanting me near you is not the same as respecting me." He reached out, his fingers brushing her hand, a tentative touch filled with longing. "Zoe, please, look at me." She lifted her gaze reluctantly. The moment their eyes met, Owen felt his breath catch. Her eyes held love, but also hurt, and the mixture tore him apart. "You are the one thing in my life that feels right," he murmured. "I cannot lose you." Zoe's voice trembled. "Love cannot survive if you push me away whenever something is difficult." "I know," he said quietly, "and I will never do it again." She pulled her hand back gently, needing space. "I need time, Owen, to breathe, to think, to remember who I am without the noise." He nodded slowly, accepting her truth even as it broke him. "I will give you all the time you need." He stepped back, his expression heavy with remorse. "But please know one thing. I love you, Zoe, more than anything." Her eyes glistened, her voice a whisper. "I love you too. But love has to be strong enough to be honest." He closed his eyes briefly, absorbing her words like a wound and a blessing. "When you are ready," he said softly, "I will be here, waiting." Owen turned toward the door, pausing only once to look back at her, his gaze filled with longing and regret. Then he left, the sound of the door clicking shut echoing through the apartment like a quiet heartbreak. Zoe stood still, her hand pressed against her chest as if trying to hold herself together. Marisol emerged from the kitchen, her expression gentle. "Are you all right?" Zoe nodded slowly, though tears finally escaped her eyes. "I will be." She walked to the window, watching the city lights glimmer through the dark. Her heart ached, but the silence around her no longer felt empty. It felt like the beginning of something new, something she would face with courage and grace. And though she did not admit it aloud, a small part of her whispered a silent hope. That love, when healed, could return stronger than before. Zoe Bennet had always been a woman of quiet resilience, but as the soft morning light filtered through the small apartment's curtains, she felt a strength she had not known in a long time. It rose slowly within her, steady and deliberate, like a tide reclaiming the shoreline. She stood barefoot on the wooden floor, hugging a warm cup of coffee between her palms, her gaze fixed on the street below. Cars passed, people hurried to work, life continued in its chaotic rhythm, but hers had shifted forever. There was no marble hallway beneath her feet, no delicate perfume of fresh lilies arranged by staff, no echo of footsteps in an oversized mansion. There was only this small space, with its modest furniture and the faint scent of new beginnings. It was a place where she could breathe without feeling watched, a place where she could rediscover the parts of herself she had set aside for love. She opened her laptop, the familiarity of its soft chime grounding her. The foundation report spread across the screen in intricate detail, each line waiting to be understood. She leaned closer, scanning vendor names, approval signatures, timestamps. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she recognized patterns emerging more clearly than before. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Yet she worked calmly, methodically, the way she had back when she was one of the most respected investigative journalists in her field. Her intuition sharpened with every scroll, every highlighted note. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from clarity. She was following her instincts again, and they had never betrayed her. A knock sounded on the door, gentle but firm. Zoe straightened, smoothing her blouse before opening it. Marisol Vega stepped in, carrying 2 coffees and a smile full of warmth and solidarity. "You have that look," Marisol said, placing the drinks on the counter. "The investigative storm is forming." Zoe let out a small breath that was almost a laugh. "I suppose it is." Marisol studied her carefully. "And how do you feel?" Zoe considered the question. "Focused. Hurt, but focused." Marisol nodded approvingly. "Good. That man may have shaken your heart, but he did not break your brilliance." Zoe's lips curved in gratitude, though her chest tightened slightly at the mention of Owen. "He did not break anything," she said softly. "He only reminded me of who I used to be." "And who you still are," Marisol added. Zoe turned back to the laptop. "I need to understand what is happening. I cannot assume anything. Facts come first." Marisol leaned against the table. "Just tell me how I can help." Zoe smiled, but with gentle sadness. "You already have." For the next hour, Zoe continued reviewing records with razor-sharp attention, piecing together inconsistencies that seemed subtle individually, but concerning collectively. Each discovery felt like a small stone placed carefully into a structure that would soon be impossible to ignore. But even as she worked, Owen Waverley lingered in her thoughts. His voice, from the night before, raw and remorseful. His eyes filled with regret as he asked for forgiveness. His presence still lived in her memory, a warm imprint she could not simply erase. Her heart softened, remembering the way he had stood in her doorway, stripped of the composure that defined him. But she also felt the sting of his earlier words, the dismissive cruelty that had torn their world apart in an instant. One truth remained. She still loved him, yet love could not blind her. When Marisol left shortly after noon, Zoe took a moment to breathe before reaching for a notebook. She began compiling her findings, recording not just numbers but patterns, links, and anomalies. Her handwriting flowed with confidence, her mind returning effortlessly to the rhythm of analytical investigation. She paused only once, when her phone vibrated. A message from Owen. "I hope you are all right. I miss you." Zoe closed her eyes briefly. She placed the phone face down on the table. She could not afford to respond, not while her emotions were so raw, not while clarity was essential. Meanwhile, across the city, Owen stood in his office, running a hand over the back of his neck in frustration. He had not expected silence. He had hoped, prayed even, that Zoe might answer. Something small, something forgiving, a single word that could ease the heaviness in his chest. But the screen remained stubbornly blank. He walked to the window, gazing at the Dallas skyline, trying to steady his breath. He had never felt so disconnected, so lost within his own world. Even the staff moved around him cautiously, as if sensing the vulnerability he could no longer hide. He pressed a hand against the cold glass. "Zoe," he whispered, "what do I do to fix this?" But there was no answer. He returned to his desk, intent on burying himself in work, but his thoughts kept drifting back to her, to the emptiness of the estate without her voice, to the hollow echo of the rooms she had once filled with warmth. He opened his notebook to draft a speech for an upcoming board meeting, but instead of words about progress and community, he found himself writing Zoe's name. Back in her apartment, the hours passed in soft silence until Zoe's computer pinged with a new alert. Her access to certain foundation accounts, ones she had previously managed as part of her role, had been revoked. She stared at the message in disbelief, feeling a wave of disbelief and anger rise through her. She whispered to herself, "So this is how they respond." But she steadied her breath. She would not break. She would not back down. She closed the laptop and rose from her chair, walking to the window to clear her thoughts. As she watched the soft golden light of late afternoon stretch across the buildings, a knock sounded again. Heart tightening, she moved to the door and opened it. Owen stood there. His presence filled the doorway with a gentle heaviness, as if carrying the weight of his own regret. He wore a deep navy suit, but without the usual armor of confidence. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly disheveled, his eyes wounded and sincere. "Zoe," he murmured, his voice low. "Please, let me talk to you." Her breath caught, but she nodded slightly and stepped aside. Owen entered the apartment slowly, as though stepping into sacred territory. His gaze moved across the room, not with judgment, but with quiet heartache. He turned to her, his expression vulnerable. "Thank you," he whispered. Zoe crossed her arms lightly, bracing herself. "What do you need to say?" Owen swallowed hard. "I owe you more than an apology. I owe you the truth." Zoe's heart thudded. "Then tell me." Owen stepped closer, holding her gaze with an intensity that both warmed and unsettled her. "The night of the gala, I was under pressure. Everyone was demanding something from me. I felt cornered, and when you pressed me about the foundation, I panicked. I lashed out." Zoe's voice remained soft but steady. "I never wanted to pressure you, Owen. I wanted transparency." "I know," he whispered, remorse written across his features. "I was wrong. I hurt you, and I cannot forgive myself for that." His hand lifted slightly, as if wanting to touch her face, but he stopped just inches away, respecting the boundary she had drawn. "Zoe," he said, his voice trembling with sincerity, "my life feels dim without you. Every room in that house feels empty. I keep listening for your footsteps, your laughter, your presence. I am lost without you." Her throat tightened painfully. "Owen, love is not enough if it comes with silence where honesty should be." He nodded slowly, tears shining in his eyes. "You are right, and I am willing to do whatever it takes to be the man you deserve." Zoe looked down, her fingers trembling. "I need time, and I need to understand things for myself." "I can give you time," he said gently, "but I do not want to lose you." Her breath softened. She lifted her gaze, and their eyes met with a tenderness that ached like a bruise. Owen took the risk of moving closer, brushing her hand with his fingertips. The contact was light, tentative, but the warmth shot through her like a forgotten melody. "Zoe," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "Tell me what I can do." She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the truth unfold inside her. "Let me be myself again," she whispered. "Let me investigate. Let me understand. And do not try to stop me." He exhaled deeply, lowering his head. "You have that right. I will not stand in your way." She felt a shift, subtle but profound, like the beginning of something new and fragile. Owen stepped back then, his voice quiet. "I wrote you something. A letter. I was not sure if I would be brave enough to say everything aloud." He pulled a folded envelope from his jacket pocket, his hands trembling slightly. He offered it to her gently. Zoe looked at the envelope, then at him, her heart tightening. "I will read it," she said softly. He nodded, though sorrow flickered in his eyes at her composed tone. "Thank you." He hesitated for a long moment, then whispered, "I love you, Zoe. That will never change." Her breath caught. "I know." Owen stepped toward the door, pausing only once. He turned his head slightly, his profile illuminated by the soft apartment light. "When you need me," he murmured, "I will come." Then he left, the door closing quietly behind him. Zoe pressed the envelope to her chest, her eyes burning with emotion she refused to release. She walked to the small sofa and sat down, holding the letter carefully, as if it contained fragile truths. Her hands trembled as she opened it slowly. And as she began to read, the room seemed to breathe around her, filled with the soft echo of a love that refused to die, no matter how broken it felt. Tears gathered in her eyes, but they did not fall. Not yet. Not while she still needed to understand everything on her own. She inhaled deeply, summoning her strength. She would not be underestimated again, not by the world, not by fate, and not by the man she still loved with every trembling inch of her heart. The Waverley estate was silent in a way Owen had never experienced. The halls felt hollow, the air too still, the soft glow of the chandeliers reflecting off the marble in a way that made everything appear colder. Every echo of his footsteps reminded him that Zoe no longer walked beside him, that her laughter no longer floated through the rooms, that the warmth she carried had vanished with her departure. He loosened his tie as he entered his office, exhaustion weighing down each breath. A stack of documents lay untouched on his desk, contracts, board notes, investor updates. None of it felt remotely important tonight. His gaze drifted instead to the silver-framed photo sitting at the corner of the desk. Zoe stood in sunlight, smiling at him with that soft, open expression she rarely gave to anyone else. Her hand was looped around his arm, her eyes shining with trust. A knot formed in his throat. He reached for the frame, tracing her image with his thumb, when something beneath the stack of papers caught his attention. A thick envelope sealed with a delicate strip of gold tape. His heart stumbled as he picked it up. His name was written on the front in Zoe's handwriting. He sank into his chair, staring at the envelope as if it could break. Slowly, he peeled open the seal and unfolded the contents inside. The first page contained a list of dates, signatures, and vendor names. Beneath it, Zoe's neat notes were written in careful margins, outlining discrepancies she had found, highlighting patterns she believed he needed to see. The second page struck him harder. It was a printed email chain between senior foundation staff discussing a payment approval, a chain Zoe had annotated with arrows and underlines. The third page was worse. A vendor invoice that bore his electronic signature, one he knew he had never personally approved. A chill ran down his spine. Zoe had not left the foundation to betray him. She had left to protect something far bigger than either of them. She had left because she believed in truth, even when he failed to honor it. He lifted the last page, a note written in her handwriting. "Owen, I do not want to fight you. I want to understand. Something is happening behind your walls, and I need you to see what I see. I believe in you. Zoe." He pressed the letter against his forehead, exhaling shakily. "Zoe," he whispered, "why did I push you away?" He felt the weight of regret settle deeper, heavy, and unavoidable. He should have listened. He should have trusted her. Instead, he had thrown her love back at her in a moment of cowardice. He needed to see her. He needed to tell her everything. Dropping the letter onto his desk, he grabbed his jacket and left the office with the urgency of a man walking toward his own salvation. The drive to her apartment felt both endless and too short. His pulse raced the entire way, the city lights blurring at the edges of his vision. When he reached her building, he paused for a moment, grounding himself, before climbing the stairs. He knocked softly. Inside, Zoe froze at the sound. She had been sitting on the sofa, the soft lamp beside her casting a warm glow as she read Owen's letter for the 5th time. Her heart thudded painfully as if trying to escape her chest. She set the letter down gently, gathered her breath, and walked toward the door. When she opened it, the sight of him stole the air from her lungs. Owen stood there, illuminated by the faint hallway light. His hair was tousled, his tie forgotten in his pocket, his expression raw and filled with something she had not seen in days, unguarded vulnerability. Their eyes locked, and for a heartbeat, neither moved. "Zoe," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "May I come in?" She hesitated, then nodded once. "Yes." He stepped inside slowly, as though entering sacred ground. His gaze followed her as she moved to the living room, her posture poised but trembling at the edges. She sat down, and he lowered himself into the chair across from her. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Owen reached into his jacket and placed the folder she had left on her desk at the estate onto the coffee table between them. "I found this," he said quietly, "and I read everything." Zoe's breath caught. "I hoped you would." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together tightly. "Zoe, I had no idea any of this was happening. I should have listened to you. I see that now. I should have trusted you." Zoe looked down, her fingers twisting together in her lap. "I never wanted to prove you wrong. I wanted to protect what we built." Owen swallowed hard. "You left me the truth even when I did not deserve it." She lifted her gaze slowly. Their eyes met, and he felt the ache of everything he had broken. "I hurt you," he whispered, "and I will regret that for the rest of my life." Zoe exhaled softly, her voice wavering. "I needed honesty, Owen. I needed space to breathe, to understand myself again." He nodded slowly, chest tightening. "I know, and I will give you all the space you need. But Zoe, please, let me explain." She leaned back slightly, folding her arms gently. "I'm listening." He ran a hand through his hair. "I have been under pressure from every direction. Investors, my father's expectations, the board. They want things to look perfect, no matter what. And I let that pressure cloud everything, including how I spoke to you, including how I pushed you away." Zoe's eyes softened with sadness, but remained resolute. "Pressure does not justify cruelty." He winced, the words cutting deep. "No, it does not. I was wrong. I will say that every day if I have to." Zoe's fingertips brushed the edge of the sofa, grounding herself. "Owen, I loved you because you were the only person who saw me, really saw me. But that night, you made me feel invisible." He inhaled sharply, pain flickering across his face. "You are the center of everything for me, Zoe. I swear to you, I never meant to make you feel small." Tears welled in her eyes, though she blinked them away before they could fall. "Then why did you say those words?" His voice broke. "Because I was afraid of failing, afraid of losing control, afraid of disappointing everyone, including you." Zoe's gaze softened as she whispered, "I never wanted control of your world, Owen. I only wanted to walk beside you." He leaned forward, his hand reaching for hers. "Walk beside me still," he pleaded. "Let me prove to you that I can be the man you believed I was." Her breath trembled when his fingertips brushed hers. The warmth of that gentle touch traveled through her arm and settled gently against her heart. She wanted to melt into him, to forget the pain, to let love override everything. But she could not surrender so easily. "Owen," she whispered, her voice deep with emotion, "love alone is not enough. We need honesty, transparency, partnership." "I will give you that," he said immediately. "Anything, everything." Zoe shook her head gently. Promises are beautiful, but actions are truth. He closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing her words, then nodded slowly. Then let me start with this. His voice softened. Thank you for leaving the folder. Thank you for believing in me, even when I did not believe in myself. Zoe's heart softened despite her pain. I left it because I wanted you to see the truth, not because I wanted to hurt you. He opened his eyes again, their depths shimmering with longing. I know. And that is why losing your trust terrifies me more than losing everything else. Zoe inhaled shakily. Owen, this is not about losing me. It is about rediscovering who we are together. He lifted her hand slowly and pressed a gentle kiss to the back of it. The touch was soft, reverent, lingering. Zoe's breath hitched as warmth spread through her, igniting a tenderness she had been trying to protect. Zoe, he whispered against her skin, tell me what you need from me now. She met his gaze, her voice barely audible. I need you to let me investigate, to understand everything on my own, and I need you not to interfere. He nodded slowly, determination settling in his expression. I will not stand in your way. A quiet shift stirred between them, a fragile but undeniable bridge beginning to rebuild itself. Zoe's shoulders softened slightly. Thank you. He sat back, his eyes never leaving hers. May I come back tomorrow? He asked quietly. Not to pressure you, only to see you. Zoe hesitated, then gave a small nod. Yes. Owen's expression eased with relief, a faint smile touching his lips. Then I will. He stood slowly, lingering for a moment as though waiting for permission to reach for her again. Zoe rose as well, her heart pulling her toward him, even as caution tugged her back. Good night, Zoe, he murmured, his voice warm and trembling with emotion. She breathed softly. Good night, Owen. Aye. He stepped toward the door, pausing to look back at her one last time, his eyes filled with unspoken devotion. Then he left quietly, allowing the night to close around him. Zoe remained standing in the living room, her hand still tingling from his touch. She pressed her fingers lightly against her chest, feeling the steady rhythm of her heart. The folder he had brought back lay on the table. The truth was waiting, and so was he. But tonight, as the lamp cast a golden halo across the room, Zoe allowed herself a moment of stillness, her heart suspended between pain and possibility. Love was still there, and so was she. The morning sun poured through the tall windows of Owen Waverley's estate, illuminating dust particles that drifted lazily in the still air. The house felt cavernous, every echo amplified by absence. The staff moved quietly, offering him sympathetic glances before disappearing into far corners of the mansion. Though they did not speak it aloud, Owen saw the truth in their eyes. The house no longer breathed without Zoe. He stood in the library, weighing the thick folder she had left behind. The papers he had once ignored now held the gravity of revelation. He traced the highlighted notes with a trembling fingertip, each stroke a reminder of her intelligence, her integrity, her courage. She had not walked away from him to punish him. She had walked away to protect her heart, her truth, and perhaps to protect him from the shadows within his own world. Owen took a deep breath, straightened his suit, and tightened his tie with renewed resolve. He had lived his life in rooms where perfection was demanded and truth was inconvenient. But today, truth mattered more than legacy, more than image, more than the weight of the Waverley name. He left the house with purpose. His first stop was the Foundation's headquarters, a sleek building ensconced in glass and steel. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt endless. When the door slid open, several board members glanced up in surprise. Owen rarely appeared without warning. He strode into the conference room with a commanding presence that silenced all whispers. The board meeting had already begun. Henry Waverley, his father, occupied the head of the table, his posture regal, his expression coldly composed. "Son," Henry said, his voice crisp, "you might have informed us before intruding." Owen ignored the tone. He placed Zoe's evidence folder on the table. "We need an independent audit." The room stiffened collectively. Henry's eyes narrowed, icy and unblinking. "That is unnecessary." "It is essential," Owen countered, his voice unwavering. "There are discrepancies in our vendor payments." Caleb Waverley leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Who discovered these supposed discrepancies?" Owen met his cousin's gaze without flinching. "Zoe." A ripple passed through the room, surprise, discomfort, perhaps fear. Henry's jaw clenched. "She is not part of this board. She holds no position here." "Her mind holds truths," Owen said sharply, "and I trust her findings more than I trust silence." Henry's voice dropped dangerously low. "You are a Waverley. You do not bring internal doubts to this table." "I do today." Owen's voice carried a quiet strength that shifted the atmosphere. He looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes. "I'm calling for an independent audit led by Ethan Rowe. Effective immediately." Caleb's mask of ease cracked slightly. "Ethan Rowe is notoriously strict. Once he starts digging, who knows what he will find?" "Exactly," Owen replied. Henry's palm slammed onto the table, making several members jump. "Owen, do not force my hand." "This is not about your hand," Owen said firmly. "This is about integrity." Silence stretched across the room like tension in a drawn bow. Finally, one board member cleared her throat gently. "If there is even a possibility of wrongdoing, the audit protects us all." Another nodded. "I agree." Reluctantly, more hands rose in support. Henry's eyes burned with fury, but even he could not overturn the majority without triggering a scandal far worse than an audit. Owen exhaled slowly, knowing this was only the first step. He left the building with his heart pounding, not from fear, but from the powerful clarity of doing what Zoe would have done. Later that afternoon, Owen drove to a small hospital on the west side of the city. It was not a place he typically visited, but he knew Zoe was there today, meeting with a scholarship recipient she had mentored for months. He entered quietly, spotting her near the waiting area. Zoe wore a cream blouse tucked into simple navy trousers, her hair pulled back into a low ponytail. She held a bouquet of soft pink flowers, offering them to the young woman seated beside her. Her smile, gentle and warm, lit the dim corridor. Owen paused at the entrance of the hall, struck by the sight of her kindness. It reminded him of how she had once changed his life, not through wealth or influence, but through compassion. When she saw him, her expression shifted, from tenderness to surprise to guarded curiosity. She excused herself and approached him slowly. "Owen," she said softly, "what are you doing here?" "I asked for the independent audit," he replied, voice low. "And I named Ethan Rowe as the lead." Zoe inhaled sharply, disbelief flickering across her features. "You did?" "Yes," he said. "Your findings were not just valid, they were necessary. I see that now." Zoe searched his eyes, her own gaze softening with a mixture of admiration and ache. "Owen, that took courage." "It took you," he whispered. She blinked, breath trembling. "I beg your pardon?" "I have spent years hiding behind the Waverley image," he said quietly, "but I do not want to live behind walls anymore. Not if those walls shut you out." He took a step closer, his voice deepening with emotion. "Zoe, you showed me the truth, and I am stepping into it, because you were right." Her eyes glistened, though not a single tear fell. She held herself with dignity, as she always did, even when emotion threatened to break through. "Owen," she whispered, her voice unsteady, "truth matters to me. So does integrity, but so does us." He reached for her hand, his fingertips brushing hers with a tenderness that sent a warm shiver through her arm. "Does us still exist?" Zoe's lips parted, but she looked down, uncertain. "I do not know how to answer that." He gently lifted her chin with the back of his knuckles. "Then let me show you why it should." For a moment, they simply breathed in each other's presence, the hospital corridor fading into stillness. "Owen," she murmured, "you hurt me." "I know," he whispered, and I will spend as long as it takes healing that hurt, if you let me." Zoe stepped back slightly, needing space to think, yet unable to deny the fire his nearness awakened inside her. "This is not about time. This is about trust." "Then give me the chance to rebuild it," he said. "Not with words, with actions." She held his gaze, and something fragile yet powerful passed between them. An unspoken recognition that love still lived, even if wounded. A nurse passed by, offering polite smiles, breaking the intensity for a brief moment. Zoe took a breath and motioned for Owen to follow her to a small alcove near the windows. The sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, casting soft shadows on the floor. When they stood alone again, Zoe turned to him. "Why did you come here?" "Because I wanted you to hear this from me," he replied. "Not from a meeting report, not from anyone else." Zoe crossed her arms lightly, hugging herself. "Well, I appreciate your honesty." Owen stepped closer, slowly, respectfully. "Zoe," he said gently, "I want to know how you feel. Not about the foundation, about us." Her breath caught painfully. "That is complicated." "I can handle complicated," he whispered. He reached out again, letting his fingers graze her forearm. The touch was subtle, but it stole her breath. The warmth of his hand reminded her of nights when they had danced in the kitchen, mornings when he traced circles on her back before she woke, evenings when he kissed her like she was his greatest treasure. "Owen," she murmured, "when you push love away, it leaves marks." He swallowed, his gaze full of remorse. "Then let me erase them gently." Her eyes fluttered closed for an instant before she opened them again. "You cannot erase pain, but you can replace it with something better." He nodded, stepping closer until only inches separated them. "Let me replace it with honesty. Let me replace it with devotion." Her breath shook. "I do not know if I am ready." He lifted her hand slowly, as though afraid the slightest force might break her resolve. "Then I will wait," he whispered. "I will wait for you, Zoe, for as long as it takes." Their hands lingered together, fingers entwined with delicate hesitation. The sunlight caught her hair, glinting like honey, and Owen felt his heart swell with a love that humbled him. Zoe looked down at their joined hands, her chest rising and falling with emotion she could not hide. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "Then let me give you reasons to," he murmured. They stood in silence, breathing the same soft rhythm, enveloped in a fragile intimacy. No grand declarations, no promises impossible to keep, only truth, only longing, only the warm, tremulous tether between their hearts. After a moment, Zoe slowly withdrew her hand, though not completely. Her fingertips brushed his palm as she spoke. "I need time, but you can walk with me, not ahead of me, not behind me." Owen nodded, his voice a tender caress. "Beside you," he said, "always." He reached for her cheek, his thumb gliding gently along her skin. "Zoe," he murmured, "I love you." Her eyes softened, shimmering with emotion she could not deny. "I know," she breathed. "I love you too." He leaned forward, and for one suspended moment their lips hovered a breath apart. The tension was warm, electric, full of unspoken yearning. But Zoe gently placed a hand on his chest, stopping the kiss with heartbreaking grace. "Not yet," she whispered. Owen exhaled, accepting her boundary with reverence. "Whenever you are ready." She stepped back slowly, her eyes lingering on his for a long, aching beat. Finally, she nodded, then turned to return to her mentorship duty. Owen remained still, watching her walk away, feeling both devastated and uplifted. She had not forgiven him fully, but she had not closed the door, and for him, that was everything. He whispered softly into the golden corridor, as if she could still hear him. "I will not fail you again, Zoe." Then he turned and walked down the hall, ready to face whatever came next with a courage he had found only because she demanded it, and because he wanted, more than anything, to be a man worthy of her love. Zoe Bennett returned to her apartment after a long day of mentoring sessions, community meetings, and quiet moments spent trying to steady her heart. The sun had set hours earlier, leaving behind only a soft wash of twilight that clung to the skyline. Her small living room was dim and calm, illuminated only by a single lamp on the side table. She set her purse down gently and exhaled, letting the silence greet her like an embrace. It had been a turbulent week, a week of unraveling truths, fragile boundaries, and uncertain reconciliation. A week in which Owen Waverley had stepped into discomfort with a courage she had not expected. She had watched him take responsibility, speak before the board, demand an independent audit that no one else dared request, and look her in the eyes with a sincerity that pierced the lingering wounds in her heart. She believed him, but belief and readiness were not the same. Zoe walked to the window, pulling the curtain aside. The night was clear, the stars faint, but visible beyond the glow of the city. She traced a small circle on the glass, her thoughts drifting back to the hospital corridor, where Owen had spoken to her with a trembling honesty she knew was real. Her phone chimed softly. She turned, expecting a message from Marisol, but froze when she saw the screen. "Owen, are you home?" Her breath caught. Her fingers hovered, unsure. Then she typed, "Yes." A second message arrived almost immediately. "Owen, may I come up?" Her heart thudded in her chest. She closed her eyes, steadying herself, then replied, "Yes." She smoothed her blouse, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and tried to calm the sudden flutter inside her. Minutes later, a gentle knock echoed through the apartment. Zoe approached the door, inhaled once and opened it. Owen stood there, illuminated by the hallway light. He wore a white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, his expression tender but unsure. His eyes softened at the sight of her, and he exhaled as if her presence was the one thing he had longed for all day. "Hi," he said quietly. Zoe swallowed, her voice barely a whisper. "Hi." He hesitated at the doorway, waiting for her to step back. When she did, he entered with slow steps, as if crossing into her space was something sacred. She closed the door, her fingers trembling slightly on the lock. Owen looked around the apartment, his gaze warm. "It feels like you," he murmured. "Calm. Real, honest." Zoe felt her cheeks warm. "It is small, but it gives me peace." He nodded gently. "You deserve peace." She motioned toward the sofa. "Would you like to sit?" He shook his head. "Not yet. I need to tell you something first." A nervous flutter rose in her chest. She remained standing, facing him, their bodies separated only by a few quiet breaths. Owen took one slow step toward her. "Zoe, today, something happened that I did not expect." His voice was calm, steady, but carried the weight of significance. "My father confronted me about the audit. He demanded that I reverse the decision." Zoe inhaled sharply. "And did you?" "No," he said, conviction in his tone. "I told him the audit stands. I told him that if transparency threatens the foundation, then we need transparency even more." Her eyes widened, admiration flickering like a candle flame. "Owen, that must have been difficult." "It was," he admitted, taking another step closer. "But you gave me the courage to do it." Zoe's breath hitched. "I did not ask you to choose between your father and me." He shook his head softly. "You did not. I chose between fear and truth." Her heart softened painfully, beautifully, at the sincerity in his eyes. "Owen," she whispered, "I never wanted you to fight your family for me." His voice deepened. "I did not fight for you. I fought for us." The words landed with profound tenderness, wrapping around her heart with gentle insistence. Zoe blinked, emotion thick in her throat. "I do not know what to say." "Say nothing," he murmured. "Just let me stand here with you." He moved closer still, until she could feel the heat of his body near hers. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with longing she had tried so hard to suppress. "Zoe," he whispered, his voice low and trembling, "I have missed you." She closed her eyes. "I know." "Oh, I miss the sound of your footsteps," he continued softly. "I miss the way you say my name when you are teasing me. I miss how you breathe when you are focusing." His voice broke faintly. "I miss every version of you." Her heart swelled with love and ache. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze with trembling vulnerability. "Owen, I am not ready to go back to the way things were." He nodded gently. "I do not want the way things were. I want better. I want honest." He paused, his voice turning even softer. "I want you." Zoe's breath fell unsteadily. "I want to trust us again." Owen lifted his hand, inching it toward her cheek. "May I?" he whispered. She hesitated for a heartbeat that stretched long and sweet. Then she nodded. His palm touched her cheek with exquisite gentleness. The warmth of his skin seeped into her, melting something she had held frozen for days. Her breath shuddered softly, and her hand rose instinctively to hold his wrist. Owen's thumb stroked her cheekbone slowly, reverently. "You feel like home," he murmured. Zoe's eyes glistened. "I am afraid," she whispered. "So am I," he admitted, leaning his forehead gently against hers. "But I would rather be afraid with you than fearless alone." Her fingers curled around the fabric of his sleeve. His nearness enveloped her, not with pressure, but with tenderness that made her want to surrender to everything she still felt for him. Their breaths mingled, warm and intimate. "Owen," she whispered, "you cannot rush this." "I will not rush anything," he replied. "I promise." She lifted her gaze slowly, their eyes meeting in a soft, trembling collision. The air thickened with longing, the kind that lived in the quiet inches between lips waiting to meet. He cupped her face with both hands now, his touch tender, worshipful. His voice fell to a whisper. "Zoe, tell me what you need." Her voice trembled with emotion. "I need you to stay." His breath hitched. "Then I am here." She stepped closer until their chests brushed lightly. Her fingers slid down his forearm, tracing the veins beneath his skin, a quiet exploration filled with emotional sensuality. Owen's breath deepened, his gaze falling briefly to her lips before lifting again to her eyes. "Zoe," he whispered, raw and full of devotion. "I love you." Tears stung her eyes, but she smiled softly, beautifully. "I love you too." He closed his eyes for a moment, overwhelmed. When he opened them again, the vulnerability in his gaze stole her breath. "Can I hold you?" he asked. There was no hesitation this time. "Yes." He wrapped his arms around her slowly, carefully, as if she were a rare, fragile treasure. Zoe pressed her cheek to his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath her ear. It was steady, warm, human. He held her tighter, but not enough to overwhelm, just enough to anchor her. Zoe closed her eyes, breathing him in, letting her fingers curl into the fabric of his shirt. The world outside faded. Only his arms, his warmth, his presence mattered. Minutes passed in silence, but it was the kind that healed rather than hurt. When she finally pulled back, she kept her hands on his chest. Owen brushed a thumb beneath her eye, catching a tear that had escaped, his touch tender. "I'm not going anywhere," he murmured. Zoe exhaled softly, the tension in her shoulders dissolving. "I believe you." He smiled, a soft, aching smile meant only for her. "Good. Because I am yours, Zoe. In every way." Her breath trembled, not from doubt, but from the depth of emotion swelling inside her. She caressed his jawline slowly, memorizing him all over again. "Then stay tonight," she whispered, "not to fix anything, not to rush anything. Just stay." Owen's eyes softened with gratitude and devotion, so pure it made her chest ache. "I will stay as long as you let me." He followed her to the sofa, where they sat close, their shoulders brushing, their hands intertwined. They talked softly, about fears, about hopes, about the tiny details of their day. Nothing grand, nothing heavy, just two hearts learning each other again. At one point, Zoe leaned her head on his shoulder, and he kissed the top of her hair with a tenderness that radiated through her entire being. The night unfolded around them like a warm embrace. No tension, no fear, just the steady return of something that had never truly died. By the time fatigue tugged at her eyes, Zoe whispered, "Owen, thank you for coming." He kissed her forehead again. "I will always come when you call." She lifted her face, their eyes meeting with quiet intensity. "Good night, Owen," she breathed. "Good night, my love," he murmured. As Zoe drifted to sleep beside him on the sofa, Owen watched her with a devotion so gentle it felt like a vow. He held her hand loosely in his thumb brushing small circles along her skin, the kind of contact that spoke more deeply than words ever could. And for the first time in many nights, Zoe slept peacefully. And for the first time in many years, Owen felt whole. Zoe Bennet woke slowly, wrapped in the soft warmth of a body that was not her own. For a moment she did not move. Her cheek rested against the firm breadth of Owen's shoulder, his arm draped protectively around her, his breathing deep and steady. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting delicate golden lines across his face, softening the sharp edges of his jaw and highlighting the quiet vulnerability in his expression as he slept. It felt intimate in a way that had nothing to do with passion and everything to do with tenderness. She lifted her hand slightly and let her fingertips hover above his chest, feeling the steady beat beneath her palm. That rhythm had once guided her through nights of uncertainty. It had once brought her comfort when words were not enough, and here it was again. Only this time she felt the weight of both past and possibility. Owen stirred beneath her, inhaling deeply. His eyes fluttered open, warm and hazy with sleep. When he saw her, his gaze softened into something that melted through every guarded place inside her. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice low and rough, as if he had not spoken for hours. Zoe felt her breath catch. "Good morning." He shifted slightly, brushing a gentle thumb along her upper arm. "I am sorry if I kept you uncomfortable." "You did not," she whispered. "I slept peacefully." He exhaled with a contentment he made no effort to hide. "I have not slept that well in months." Zoe tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, suddenly shy. "I am glad." For a few quiet seconds they lay there, wrapped in the soft hum of morning stillness, neither willing to break the moment. It felt warm, fragile, suspended. But eventually Zoe sat up slowly, smoothing her hair back. Owen followed her with his gaze, full of unspoken longing. "Zoe," he said softly, "last night meant more to me than you know." She held his gaze, feeling the sincerity radiating from him. "It meant a lot to me, too." He reached forward, taking her hand in his. "I know trust does not rebuild overnight, but I want to earn it. Every day, every hour, whatever it takes." Zoe exhaled, touched by his earnestness. She squeezed his hand gently. "One day at a time, Owen. That is all I ask." He nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "Then we start today." Later that morning, Zoe prepared a simple breakfast. The scent of warm toast and fresh strawberries filled the kitchen, mingling with the soft sound of coffee brewing. Owen leaned against the counter, watching her with quiet admiration, as if every small movement she made was worth memorizing. "You look beautiful," he said softly. Zoe laughed under her breath. "I am wearing pajamas." He stepped closer, brushing her cheek with the back of his fingers. "You look beautiful." Her heart fluttered at the soft intensity in his voice. She turned away only because if she did not, she might have melted entirely. As they sat at the small table, sharing coffee and quiet conversation, Zoe could not help thinking how different this was from their life in the Waverley estate. There, luxury had been everywhere. Here, simplicity reigned. But here, with mismatched mugs and sunlight spilling across the wooden floor, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Safe. After breakfast, Zoe returned to her laptop. Owen watched her work from the sofa, not intruding, simply observing. There was reverence in his eyes as she analyzed reports, cross-checked data, and compiled her findings with razor-sharp clarity. "You are extraordinary," he murmured more than once. Zoe felt warmth bloom in her chest, though she tried to remain focused. Around midday, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and stiffened. "It is Caleb," she said quietly. He wants to meet with me. Owen immediately straightened. Why? I do not know. He says he has important information. A shadow crossed Owen's face, a mix of concern and protectiveness. I do not trust Caleb. Zoe bit her lip. I agree, but information could help us. Owen stood and approached her, his hands gently cupping her shoulders. Then I'm going with you. Her heart warmed. No, if you go, he will not talk freely. His jaw tightened. Zoe. She touched his cheek softly. Owen, I'm not afraid. And I know how to handle myself. He held her hand against his cheek, his eyes dark with emotion. I just got you back. I cannot lose you again. You are not losing me, she whispered. I promise. He leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead, lingering. Then call me the moment you finish. The moment. I will. Zoe left a short while later, her heart steady but alert. She arrived at a chic downtown cafe, where Caleb sat at a corner table wearing an expensive suit and an expression of false ease. Zoe, he greeted with a thin smile. You look radiant. She sat without returning the compliment. What do you want? Caleb chuckled. Straight to business. I always liked that about you. She leaned forward slightly. Caleb. His smile faded, replaced by a calculating stare. You and Owen have been stirring things up. The audit was a bold move, but bold does not always mean wise. Zoe remained perfectly still. Are you threatening me? Not at all, he replied smoothly. I am warning you. Owen is walking into a storm bigger than he understands. There are people on the board who do not appreciate disruption. Zoe's breath tightened. If there is wrongdoing, it must be exposed. Caleb smirked. Perhaps, but exposure comes with consequences. She narrowed her eyes. Is that all you called me here for? Vague intimidation. Caleb leaned forward, lowering his voice. I called you here because you are the only person Owen listens to. If you care about him, convince him to let this audit go. Zoe stared at him, disbelief turning to quiet outrage. You are asking me to betray the truth. I am asking you to protect him, Caleb corrected. You know what the board thinks of your relationship. You know how they see you, a distraction, an outsider. If Owen falls, they will blame you. Zoe felt the words burn, but she did not flinch. I would rather be blamed for standing beside him than be praised for abandoning him. Caleb's jaw tightened. Do not be foolish, Zoe. Walk away. Let this die. She rose from her seat calmly. I will not. As she turned to leave, Caleb spoke again, his voice cool. If he loses everything, do not say I did not warn you. Zoe walked away without looking back. When she stepped outside, she immediately called Owen. He answered on the first ring, breathless. Zoe, are you all right? I am fine, she said, though her voice trembled with emotion. I am coming home. When she returned to her apartment, Owen was already waiting outside her door. The moment he saw her, he crossed the hallway in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms. Zoe melted against him, her cheek pressed to his chest. His arms wrapped around her with fierce relief. Thank God, he murmured into her hair. I was worried. I am fine, she whispered, holding him tightly. But Caleb tried to intimidate me. Owen stiffened, anger flickering across his expression. What did he say? She told him everything, her voice steady, her words precise. Owen listened, his jaw tightening with each sentence. Zoe, he said when she finished, you have nothing to fear. I will not let anyone touch you. She placed a gentle hand on his cheek. I am not afraid for myself, Owen. I am afraid for you. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers. Do not be. I am stronger with you beside me. Zoe felt her heart tremble. Then we face this together. He exhaled, his breath warm against her lips. Together. For a long moment, they simply held each other in the hallway, their hearts beating in quiet unison. When finally they stepped inside, Owen closed the door gently and turned to her with an expression so filled with love and reverence, it made her breath shudder. Zoe, he whispered, I choose you, above everything, above the board, above the foundation, above the Waverley name. Her lips parted, her heart swelling with a painful swell of emotion. "Do not say things you cannot take back." "I will not take it back," he said firmly. "You are the woman I love, the woman I respect, the woman I want beside me, whether the world approves or not." Zoe placed her hand on his chest, feeling the steady beat beneath her fingertips. "Owen." He stepped closer, cupping her face with both hands, his touch tender and trembling. "I choose you," he whispered again, softer this time, as if it were prayer. Her eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. "Then kiss me," she whispered. The air shifted, warm and electric. Owen brushed his thumb across her lower lip, his breath mingling with hers. He kissed her with a slowness that made the world fall away. No urgency, no desperation, just deep, quiet devotion. His lips tasted like apology, like promise, like a man who had finally learned how to love without fear. Zoe kissed him back gently, her hands sliding up his chest to wrap around his neck. The connection was soft, sensual, without crossing the line, filled with emotion so powerful it made her knees weaken. Owen held her securely, guiding the kiss with reverence, as if she were something precious he had waited his whole life to deserve. When they finally parted, they remained forehead to forehead, breathing the same tender air. "I love you," Zoe whispered. Owen closed his eyes, emotion trembling through his voice. "I love you too. More every day." They stood in silence, holding each other, wrapped in love that had survived storms and wounds, emerging stronger, together, for the first time, truly together. The evening settled over Dallas like a velvet curtain, soft and heavy with anticipation. Zoe Bennet sat at her small dining table, the glow of a single lamp illuminating the documents spread before her. Her notebook lay open, filled with her precise handwriting, arrows, dates and observations that now formed a clear picture. The independent audit was underway, but Zoe had already uncovered enough to confirm what her instincts had been whispering from the beginning. The discrepancies in the foundation were deliberate, and they led back to someone close. She closed the notebook gently, exhaling as the weight of truth settled onto her shoulders. She felt neither triumphant nor scared, only resolute. Tonight, the board would meet privately, under pressure from the audit's preliminary findings. Owen had asked her to stand by his side, not because he needed her to defend him, but because he wanted her there as his equal, his partner. Zoe touched the edge of her blouse lightly, grounding herself. She was not the woman who once walked through immaculate marble halls, uncertain of belonging. She was the woman who followed truth wherever it led. And tonight, that truth would speak through both her courage and Owen's conviction. A knock sounded on her door. Her pulse quickened, though she already knew who it was. When she opened the door, Owen Waverley stood on the other side, wearing a dark suit that emphasized the strength of his shoulders and the quiet determination in his posture. But it was his eyes that captured her breath. They were warm, steady, and filled with a depth of affection that made her heart ache. "Zoe," he murmured, drinking in the sight of her. "Are you ready?" She nodded gently. "Yes." He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers with a tenderness that sent warmth blooming through her entire body. "Thank you for standing with me." Zoe lifted her gaze to his. "We stand together now, Owen. That is what we chose." Emotion flickered in his eyes, and he brushed a soft kiss over her knuckles before leading her toward the waiting car. The Waverley Foundation's private boardroom stood on the top floor of the headquarters, its walls lined with glass that overlooked the glowing skyline. Tonight, the long table was surrounded by tense faces. Henry Waverley sat at the head, composed but rigid, his expression carved from stone. Board members whispered among themselves, glancing anxiously toward the door as Owen entered with Zoe by his side. A hush fell. For a moment, Zoe felt every gaze shift toward her. Some held curiosity, others judgment, a few admiration. But when Owen placed a gentle hand at the small of her back, guiding her forward with quiet pride. The tension inside her softened. Henry Waverley's eyes hardened. "Owen, this meeting is confidential. She does not belong here." Zoe lifted her chin, prepared to speak, but Owen stepped forward first, his voice calm but unyielding. "She does. Zoe discovered the discrepancies you refuse to acknowledge. She has more insight into this situation than anyone in this room." Henry's lips pressed into a tight line. "This is highly irregular." "Integrity is not always regular," Owen replied coolly. Zoe felt a quiet surge of admiration. He was different now, stronger, braver, a man willing to challenge even his father for righteousness. The meeting began. Documents passed around, voices shifting between defensiveness and unease. Ethan Rowe, the independent auditor, stood at the front with composed confidence. "Our preliminary investigation shows repeated patterns," Ethan began. "Unapproved payments routed through a vendor that appears legitimate on paper but does not exist in practice. These payments were authorized with digital signatures that were replicated from high-level executives. The amounts increased steadily over several months." Gasps whispered through the room. Zoe watched the board as they examined the evidence she had first identified. Owen glanced at her with gentle acknowledgement, as if silently telling her, "You were right, and I am proud of you." Ethan continued, "We traced the unauthorized transactions to a single source, Caleb Waverley." All eyes turned toward Caleb. He stiffened, the easy charm wiped from his face. "This is ridiculous. Anyone could have manipulated those files." Ethan handed him a page. "This is the device signature used for the approvals. It matches your home office." Caleb's composure cracked. "I did nothing wrong. This is a misunderstanding." Henry rose sharply. "Caleb, tell me this is false." Caleb faltered. For the first time, arrogance gave way to panic. Zoe stepped forward calmly, her voice soft but resolute. "Caleb, the truth is already here. Continuing to deny it will only harm everyone further." Caleb turned on her with venom. You are the reason this entire mess exploded. You and your curiosity. You and your nose in everything that does not concern you." Zoe held his gaze without trembling. "Integrity concerns everyone." Owen moved between them in a single protective step. "Do not raise your voice at her." Caleb scoffed bitterly. "Of course. She gives you a few tears and suddenly she is the woman who runs your world." Owen's expression turned to steel. "She does not run my world. She is my world." The room froze. Zoe's breath caught, her heart thundering in her chest. Owen's eyes softened when he turned to her. "It is time they all know," he said gently. "You are the woman I love. The woman who has stood by truth even when I failed to. The woman I choose." Her eyes shimmered, but she stayed composed, dignity radiating from her like a quiet flame. Ethan cleared his throat gently. "The evidence is sufficient to remove Caleb from his position pending legal review." The decision moved swiftly after that. Caleb stormed out of the room, his posture defiant, but his expression fractured. Henry remained rigid, his jaw set with a mix of humiliation and fury. But even he did not defend Caleb further. Once the meeting adjourned, the board members gradually filtered out, leaving Owen and Zoe alone in the expansive room, bathed in golden city light. Zoe turned toward Owen. "You did it." He shook his head softly. "We did it." She stepped closer, her voice trembling with emotion. "Owen, what you did today, choosing truth, choosing transparency, choosing love over fear, it was courageous." He reached for her hand, lifting it gently. "Zoe, I could not have done any of it without you. You changed the way I see everything." Her smile trembled. "You changed too. You faced your fears. You stood against your father. That was not because of me. That was because you finally believed in yourself." He cupped her cheek, brushing his thumb slowly across her skin. "You helped me become the man I always wanted to be." Zoe's breath softened, her body leaning into his touch as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Owen," she whispered, "I am proud of you." Emotion tightened his throat. "I love you." She stepped closer, placing a hand over his heart, feeling its steady beat. "And I love you. But today, I also trust you again." He closed his eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by the depth of her words. When he opened them, something inside him had settled, something peaceful, something whole. "Zoe," he said, his voice low and full of reverence, "I want to build a life with you. One built on truth, one built on partnership, one built on love." Her eyes glistened with tears she did not attempt to hide. "Then let us start now." Owen pulled her gently into his arms. Not with urgency, not with desperation, but with profound affection. Zoe rested her head against his chest, closing her eyes as his hand slid slowly up her back, a gesture filled with unspoken devotion. They stayed like that for a long while, wrapped in the stillness of victory, healing, and love. When she finally lifted her face, Owen cupped it with both hands. Their foreheads touched, breaths mingling, hearts aligned. "Zoe," he whispered, "you are everything I ever hoped for." Her voice trembled with emotion. "And you are the man I always knew you could be." He kissed her then, softly, tenderly, reverently, a kiss filled with redemption, with love reborn, with the promise of a future neither of them needed to fear. As their lips parted, Zoe smiled through her tears. "We made it." Owen rested his forehead against hers, his voice a vow spoken in a whisper. "Together." The city lights glowed around them, shimmering like stars caught between glass and sky, and for the first time in a long time, their hearts felt completely free. 9 years had passed since the night Zoe Bennet and Owen Waverley chose truth over fear, love over silence, and courage over convenience. Time had carved its own story into their lives, smoothing some edges, deepening others, and transforming their world in ways neither of them could have imagined. The Waverley Foundation headquarters looked different now. The glass walls still gleamed in the Dallas sun, but the atmosphere carried a warmth that had once been absent. Transparency was no longer a whispered ideal, it was the Foundation's identity. The board had changed drastically over the years. New members with genuine passion replaced those who clung to old systems. Programs flourished, communities thrived, and the Foundation became a national model for integrity. And at the heart of it all were two people who had once stood alone in a boardroom, facing down an entire dynasty with nothing but truth and each other. Zoe stepped onto the Foundation's rooftop garden, now a refuge she had designed herself. Her hair was longer, her elegance timeless, her presence as grounding as the first day Owen realized she was the woman who would change everything. She wore a soft cream dress that moved lightly in the breeze, and in her hands she held a portfolio of notes for the afternoon's scholarship ceremony. Behind her, small footsteps echoed. "Mum, Dad said you forgot your coffee again." A girl of 7 years old ran toward her, dark curls bouncing, her brown eyes sparkling with mischief and brilliance. Zoe laughed warmly and knelt as her daughter threw her arms around her. "Thank you, sweetheart," Zoe said, kissing the girl's cheek. "What would I do without you?" Amelia shrugged proudly. "Probably be thirsty all morning." Zoe laughed and scooped her up, lifting her onto her hip. "Where is your father?" "Arguing with my brother about ties," Amelia giggled. "He says ties are boring. Dad says they are sophisticated." "That sounds accurate," Zoe said, smiling. A moment later, footsteps approached, heavier, familiar, steady. Owen stepped into the garden, wearing a charcoal suit and a crooked tie that hinted he had been wrestling with something, or someone, moments earlier. His hair had a touch of silver at the temples now, but it only made him more striking. He gave Zoe the smile he reserved for her alone, a smile that still made her heart warm after all these years. "He refuses to wear the tie," Owen said with mock exasperation. On cue, a boy of 5 years old marched out behind him, his small chest puffed defiantly. "Ties choke creativity," the boy said, echoing something he had likely heard from Zoe during a philosophical debate she once had with a journalist. Zoe chuckled. Daniel, love, you do not have to wear one. Today is about celebrating, not choking creativity. Daniel beamed triumphantly. Owen sighed. You are both ganging up on me. Zoe walked toward him, Amelia still on her hip, and brushed her fingers along the edge of his crooked tie. I think you look perfect, she murmured. He kissed her softly, Amelia rolling her eyes in exaggerated disgust, making both parents laugh. Their love had not faded with time. It had deepened, matured, settled into a steady, unwavering truth. It was a love built from trials, tested by storms, strengthened by transparency. It was a love that had learned how to bend, not break. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. The scholarship students are arriving soon, he said. Are we ready? Zoe nodded. More than ready. They walked together toward the elevator, their children skipping ahead, their laughter ringing against the sky. Along the way, employees greeted Zoe warmly, not with the cautious respect they once gave her, but with admiration. She was not just Owen's wife. She was the co-director of the Foundation's ethics program, a role she had shaped with undeniable brilliance. Owen, too, had transformed. He was still a powerful man, still charismatic, still fierce when protecting what mattered. But he was no longer ruled by image or shadows. He led with transparency, compassion, and humility. His father had never forgiven him for the audit that exposed wrongdoing, but the distance between them became a blessing rather than a wound. Owen had built a new kind of legacy, one grounded in truth rather than illusion. Caleb, after years of legal battles, had paid a steep price for his decisions. He spent time in prison for financial misconduct and later disappeared from the public eye entirely. The empire he had tried to manipulate crumbled beneath him, while the future he once mocked, Zoe and Owen's shared mission, rose stronger than ever. As for society, change rippled outward. The Foundation's reforms inspired others. Philanthropy across Texas shifted toward higher accountability, internships expanded, scholarships multiplied, and marginalized communities gained access to resources that had once been lost in bureaucratic shadows. Zoe and Owen's love became a quiet symbol, a reminder that integrity was still possible, that transparency could coexist with power, and that love could survive even when broken. Later that evening, after the award ceremony and speeches, after Daniel fell asleep on a sofa and Amelia pretended she was not tired at all, Zoe stood alone on the rooftop garden again. The city lights twinkled below, mirroring the stars above. She heard footsteps behind her. I knew I would find you here, Owen said softly. Zoe smiled as he wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her against his chest. She leaned into him naturally, her eyes closing as she breathed in the familiar scent of him. Warmth, cedar, and something uniquely Owen. 9 years, she whispered, almost in awe. 9 years, he echoed, brushing a kiss along her hair. And I would choose you again every single day. Zoe turned in his arms, resting her hands on his chest. His eyes held the same devotion they had the night he told the board she was his world. Do you ever think about who we were back then? She asked softly. He cupped her face with tender hands. All the time. And I thank God we are not those people anymore. Zoe smiled, her eyes shimmering with nostalgia. We didn't know how strong we could be. No, Owen murmured. We only learned that together. He kissed her then, slow, warm, reverent, a kiss full of history and hope, a kiss that told an entire story without speaking a word. When they finally parted, Owen pressed his forehead to hers. I love our life, he whispered. Zoe's voice trembled with emotion. I love you. The wind carried their whispered vows into the night, weaving them into the skyline, into the city, into the story they had written through heartbreak, truth, and devotion. Their children slept peacefully inside. Their foundation thrived. Their love endured. And as Owen held her beneath the stars, Zoe knew with absolute certainty that the life they built was not perfect. But it was true, and that made it beautiful. Thank you for staying with Zoe and Owen until the very last chapter of their journey. Their story reminds us that love is not defined by perfection, but by courage. It is built not on flawless moments, but on honesty, patience, and the willingness to grow, even when it is painful. Zoe taught us that respecting ourselves is the first step toward teaching others how to love us. Owen showed us that true strength lies not in power or status, but in humility and the determination to do what is right, even when it costs everything. Their love survived because it learned to bend without breaking, because it chose truth over silence, because it understood that real commitment is tested in the moments when walking away feels easier than fighting for what matters. And now, I would love to hear your reflections. Which moment touched you the most? Which lesson from Zoe and Owen will stay with you? If you watched until the end, comment the word truth below. That single word will tell me that you stayed with this story to its final breath, and it will help our channel reach more hearts. If this story moved you and you wish to support the team that brings these emotional romances to life, you can send a super thanks in any amount you feel comfortable with. Every gesture, no matter the size, helps us continue creating the stories you love. And if supporting financially is not possible, sharing this video with someone who enjoys dramatic romantic tales is another beautiful way to help grow our community. Do not forget to explore the other heartfelt narrations I left for you in the cards, each one filled with emotion, conflict, healing, and romance worthy of your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for feeling this story with us.